This one. All right, I'm going to start sharing screen. So I'll wait for that lag to catch up.
Sorry, Danielle?
Yes.
I'm able to record. So I'm from Telstra Health Network here. So I'm recording the meeting.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Someone in the tenant.
Yep, I can see that's recording now. And I've just started sharing my screen again. I'll wait for that lag to catch up for the folks online. All right, here we are. Okay, so we're here. It's a Tuesday. It's an AU core meeting. It's a slightly different time, of course, because we're usually on a Thursday at about lunchtime. But it's the work group meeting day. We've already had an acknowledgement of country. So what I'm going to do is advise people that throughout the day-to-day, there will be probably photos taken, not so much video, but photos taken from HL7 Australia that might be posted on Instagram and so forth, or LinkedIn. If this is something that you're concerned about, please approach the HL7 AU team. They're right at the beginning, so speak to Alette, let her know so that she can make sure that you aren't in any of those photos. And of course, I think everyone is now aware that this meeting is being recorded because we've just spent a few minutes making sure that we absolutely are recording. And that's what we're going to do. So if you're in the room or online, please be aware that that's what happens. That's what happens really for all our meetings. So I'm going to go on now to hybrid meeting etiquette. It looks like we've actually got a really good setup in terms of microphones, both for online and in here, which is awesome. So what we're going to try to do as much as possible is have this be one meeting for everybody. Because of how this is set up, I won't be monitoring the chat and really nobody else will be. So for those people online or have joined in the room, if there's something that you want to ask a question about or have raised in this meeting, please pop your hand up either in Teams or just physically if you're in the room. I know that might be tiring, but we'll get to it and we'll get to you. If you are using chat, because I'm not monitoring it, if there are other people who know the answer to that, if you could help people out online and respond to that, that would be really interesting. And so we'll try to go in order, basically, and work out who's doing what. Now, I'll ask, Brett, could you keep an eye on who's popping their hand up online and let me know, just in case it's not visible to me. There's a screen and someone from HL7 AU is signalling something to me and I can't work it out. And they've gone away, so maybe it wasn't a big thing. And we'll try to do things in order. Basically. We're going to use menti.com to do voting. Usually, if you've come to AU core meetings in the past or e-requesting or at the fire work group, we do our conference calls, we do those using Zoom, we use Zoom polls. Because we're in a space today and Telstra's been amazing and given us a venue to do this, we need to use what works for the room, and that is Microsoft Teams. So we can't use Zoom polls. So we're going to use Menti to vote. So what we're going to ask people pretty soon is to go to menti.com. You can get ahead of the curve if you want to and go there now. There's the code. This will come up. We'll do a little practice vote soon. And we're going to be using that for voting. And I'll ask those online and those in the room, and probably especially myself, that when we're speaking to try to remember to say your name when you speak so that people know you're talking. I'm really, really bad at that. I want to get better at it, and hopefully other people are also able to do it. We're just, I think, really used to being more either in the one room and it not being hybrid, or in the one kind of Zoom space and it's quite obvious who's talking at the time. And yeah, look, I think that's it in terms of the hybrid meeting etiquette. I don't think we covered, okay, so let's talk about the thing I mentioned about voting, about decision making. Everybody who comes to every single meeting, whether you remember or not, is absolutely welcome to participate. Everything is open. Aura's open, e-requesting's open, the fire work group is open. The point is to have a community across Australia making decisions. If you're a regular member, that is amazing. But if you've just come today and this is your first time, we want you to participate. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to know whether you are for something or against something, or if you're not sure, that's fine. That's what abstaining is for. We'll go through it in just a second. And I don't think, Brett, I don't think you went through the specifics of the decision-making. Okay. So for today, and really for all HL7 AU and HL7 international decisions, we operate largely under Robert's rules, but what that really comes down to is that we want to know what a decision is that we're about to make, and that's called a formal motion. And that can be something like, how about we meet next Tuesday instead of Thursday? It's a decision that we're deciding as a group to make. So we just need to know what that decision is. That's what we call the formal motion. It's something where everyone in the room knows what we're about to say yes or no to, basically. Someone motions, which says, yes, I'd like to say, let's go ahead with this decision. Someone seconds it, and then we go through and do a majority vote around affirmative, negative. So affirmative means yes, I am for this decision. Negatives means no, I do not agree with what has been proposed. And abstain is where you're stating that you aren't able to yet come to the position on whether you are for or against this. Sometimes that's because, depending on the subject under topic, you have no skin in the game. Let's say you maybe it's approval of minutes. You weren't at the last meeting, so you're abstaining because you don't have enough information to make a decision, or you don't care about it at all. In which case, sure, abstain. So we're about to go through a practice. So what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to go to menti.com. And I want you to either put in that code or use the QR on your screen to go to that, be that on your phone or your computer or your iPad or whatever you've got. I'm going to go through a practice vote for using Menti rather than what we typically do. So I'm going to bring up Menti now. So if you've gone to Menti, what you will have seen is a practice vote. This is a practice vote. We're asking you to vote affirmative, negative, or abstain. Go through and use those controls. And if you can see on the top, if you haven't yet, if you didn't capture that information, there's the code up there. If that's not big enough for people, I can pop a QR code up on the screen. Just giving people another couple of moments to go through that. And this is what all the groups will use today. So e-requesting will use this in the next session. We're using it now. The fire work group will use it at the end. That's how today is going to operate, basically. All right. So that's where we're at. So at this point, as I said, so I'm chairing the meeting today. Jamie is the scribe. I would say that the motion is passed. If this was a real motion, we have 28 in the affirmative, 11 negative, 11 abstaining. Those would be captured in the minutes, basically, and circulated to everybody. So I'm going to end that vote now. We'll go back to the meeting. And let's talk about today. I just need to keep a track of time. We've got until 10:45 and then morning tea is out and we really don't want to miss it. Okay, so overall today, so we've gone through and Brett's done the welcome and intro and we're in the AU course Spark TDG now. This is lagging by a few seconds, so I'll just wait for that to display. It was a more direct one. Shouldn't tempt fate. Okay. So we're in the AU Core TDG now. And then we'll be doing morning tea. After morning tea starts e-requesting. E-requesting is going to go through. It's got several sessions today. It's not in this room, and it's also not in this dial-in. So the people online who are intending to go to e-requesting, you will need to dial in either in the meeting invite, or if you look, I think at the, where does that tiny code go? That's a very good question. Where did I make it go? I've just clicked on it. We'll see what happens. Or the agenda for today. Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. So that tiny code will take you to the day's agenda and will give you all the logon details for all the sessions. E-requesting is the same. So for the online folks, there's just one e-requesting log on. It stays there the whole day, although there'll be breaks for like half hour, 45 minutes while lunch and afternoon tea happens. So that starts in our next session after morning tea. And then it's going through until definitely lunch. And there's a number of key objectives for e-requesting. And so there's the possibility that in that last quarter, so after afternoon tea and before we close, the e-requesting will continue in order to finish and wrap up the decisions they were making around task. The firework group will be operating in that last quarter anyway, so there may in fact be two groups operating in parallel. They have separate logons and separate rooms, so you'll need to, I guess, move to whichever room, whichever logon that you want to attend. We're closing at 4:30. And there is a co-chair meeting for half hour this afternoon, which is just for co-chairs and is running through some of the admin and HL7 Australia kind of business. If you're in person in Brisbane, I am sure there will be, I'm sure there are drinks / snacks / the other kind of thing where we all kind of gather together and find a spot later in the day and go have chats, basically, and continue whatever it is what we were talking about. Don't know where that is yet. Stay tuned. So let's go into, so that was kind of like the overall view of today. Let's just talk about what today's agenda is for AU Core. So here's what we put up. Usual business, every work group starts with usual business, which is always approval of minutes, going through any updates, and talking about actions. Then today's session was really going to be about planning and starting to do some of the report back from the AU Core testing. And if we had time, start looking at the first set of ballot issues which are coming in for AU Core, because we're soon going to be moving into final ballot reconciliation for R1 for AU Core before we move on to the glorious future that is AU Core R2, which I'm very excited about. And then wrap up with what our next meeting is. We're probably a little bit beyond that time frame, so I'll need to move a little bit faster, but we're all here, so we'll see how quick we can go. And our first point of business then, usual business, is approval of minutes of the last meeting. So if you're at the last meeting, if you're an AU Core member, you would have got these sent around. So these are out, they've been up for review. Here's what those minutes look like. If you're new, we always capture all the attendees. There's the recording of the meeting, transcript and chat log, the slides for the meeting that happened, and then we have the minutes for the meeting, which is less minutes of a normal meeting and more about any decisions that were taken, major topics, ejections, approvals of things. It's more like a summary of the meeting. So this was sent round for review. All feedback has been incorporated. So I'm happy at this point to entertain a motion to approve the minutes if someone would like to. Okay, Brett is motioning to approve the minutes. Is someone happy to second?
Wait a second, Jamie.
Okay, Jamie is seconded. So now we're going to go to voting, and this is going to be Menti. So go back to your Menti screen, people. If you've lost where that is, I can put up the QR code again. Just let me know. And we're now voting for approval of the minutes. So affirmative. Approve the minutes. Negative means you don't approve the minutes. Maybe you think something needs to change. And abstain is typically for those people who weren't at the meeting, basically. We'll just let that settle. A few more people are voting. All right, that looks, no, not quite stable. Close. Voting slowed down.
Countdown.
Sorry?
You're going to count down?
I am going to count down. Right, so final vote in 3, 2, 1. So what we have now is that the motion is passed. We have affirmative. 22 people have approved the minutes. There are 0 negatives and 26 people have abstained, which is expected for this kind of meeting where we're bringing everyone together that we don't usually tend to see. And have you got that, Jamie? You're all good for it? Okay, excellent. So, all right, back to the meeting. So we've approved the minutes now, and now we're up to updates. So the ballot for working standard is open. So where we are up to in AU Core is really the last gasp, the final parts of it. We've done all the work to put something out, which we've said is the draft standard. This is what we're proposing is published for AU Core R1. It's now going through the ballot process in HL7 Australia to give us the authorisation to publish. Part of that is where any feedback is raised, be that where people identify that they think that maybe some changes should be considered, but especially and importantly, where people might vote negatively, which is where people indicate that they've identified an issue that is sufficient to hold up the publication of the entire R1. Basically, if you're voting negative, that's what you mean. And that's really important for us as the technical design group to know if someone actually thinks that there is a big enough issue that we need to really look at that before we move to R1. So that's what that process is going through now. We expect to get most of those as affirmative. If not all of them, we'll see how it goes. And so that's open. It's only been open for this week now. So like the last week. So we've got 5 issues in already. It's still going to be open for another few weeks. And the AU Core co-chairs have met and triaged 2 of those 5 issues. So, you know, we're maybe 1% through it. So it's happening, basically, which is important because our next meeting for in a fortnight will be ballot reconciliation. This is our, I guess, in between where we've put out something for ballot and in between where we are now we're reconciling those ballot issues. This is our in-between meeting, which is talking about testing where we are, what further evidence do we have, and what is our planning before we go into a focus on ballot reconciliation to really close out the R1 period for AU Core. And so at every meeting, you're going to get an update on how many issues are there now, who's voted on them, where are we at for things until we get 100% across the board. I just wanted to bring people's attention to the fact that tomorrow is Connectathon. The next couple of days are Connectathon. That's in person, that's not hybrid. But I also want to address that if you can't make it in person, maybe you signed up and you're prepared for it, but you just can't be there in person for whatever reason, or you're actually interested to do some testing through the endpoints that are only made available during Connectathon, that's possible. What we'd like you to do, if that's something you're interested in, is to hop onto this Zulip channel. So this is where we're talking about and doing AU core testing. This is where all the links are if you have questions. There are, during the Connectathon period, things that are made available that aren't made available at any other time. So if your client who wants to access any of the servers, or if you want to make available a server for the Connectathon, can't be here in person, please jump onto that and post in there. And you can be a part of this process over the next couple of days. These slides will be available on Confluence soon. You can see there's a tiny URL at the bottom. So I'm going to move on now from updates and into planning. So because this is a bit of a transition meeting in between where we've just achieved a major milestone for AU Core, we've put something out. We've put out R1 basically for approval by the consensus body, which is HL7 Australia. And before we move into reconciliation, it's important for us to look back at where we are now, what have we achieved, and look into planning and start talking about R2 because it's honestly not that far away. So what you're seeing on the screen is, I mean, yes, there's some images about where we are. We're here for ballot for R1. And in terms of R1, that's been an 18-month process from when it was put up as a proposal for a standard, going through development of 6 months and then going into a refinement testing period, which is where we've been up until this ballot period. And as of last week, we're now in that last phase of ballot. The diagram is actually slightly wrong. I realised that early this morning and couldn't be bothered to change it because that would take a long time and I couldn't find the source diagram. I'll fix it for next time. The month is slightly different. So you might see where that yellow arrow is. So all the numbers at the top are months. So it's an 18-month period. And it says for ballot, it's got 2 there. That's not quite right. Ballot is always 1 month. So what's wrong there is that ballot is 1 month. Resolution is 2 and then publish is 2. So it's still 18 months. We've just got the border wrong of where those phases end. So that's the rough period of time to stand up a first release. And then the idea was that we were going into yearly updates. So we're very, very close now to completing AU Core R1. And part of what we've done in terms of maturing the baseline is going through these phases, and we're finally in that last phase. We've gone from the very beginning where we had an idea. We had AU Core, we formed the technical design group, we went through a bunch of proposed content on what would work, right into having some relatively complete drafts and going through a number of meetings and reviews to form those drafts of profiles and capability statements to put together a potential baseline for AU Core. And then we went through a QA period where we were actually taking this through Connectathons. We did the ballot for comment in March and got some really amazing feedback from the community that drove where we needed to scope AU Core and where we needed to firm up, especially around the conformance requirements. So there's a number of significant changes in AU Core from that community direction through the ballot for comment in that QA period, where we went into what is FMM1. I'll go through some of those terms in just a second for people who are I guess, newer to this group and are finding those unfamiliar. Where we're now looking at working with the drafts we have, basically, in FMM1 to go, this is the draft we've got, is this working, in order to put together a standard to go for, well, I mean, it's the draft standard for working standard, basically. This is what we're saying is AU Core R1. And that's where we are now. We've put that out. We're in the last part of that period where very soon we'll be working through resolution and reconciliation of these items, and we'll also be going through any final testing to look at where we have parts of AU Core that maybe we're not so sure of. Maybe there are things we're thinking, I don't know if that's something we want to put forward for a working standard. I guess at this last period, some of the things we do is some of looking at the scoping down, essentially. And that's some of the questions that will come to the AU Core meetings on where are we confident, basically. And that's part of the AU Core testing report back I'm going to do, to go, where have we got testing? Where are we across things? Where do we need more work? And where maybe do we need to take that out of R1 and it's more R2? Okay, so quick recap on the FMM levels. So I'm only going up to 2. They go up to 5 normative. And we're working through at the moment in AU Core these levels. Even we'll be doing the same. I think there's someone online who needs to go on mute. Where we started at draft 0, we had a draft, the thing, do we like it, do we not like it, where are we arguing? Through our ballot for comment and some connectathons, we went to FMM1, which was to say that the committee, the responsible work group, we're all counted as a work group, the TDG is, we're a technical subcommittee of the fire work group, has assessed this and determined that this is substantially complete and ready for implementation. Now, for those people online and for those people in the room who are new to this, ready for implementation means let's start playing with it. It's no longer paperware. We're going to try and put it in a servers, see if it works. Not that it's production system ready, but that we're actually going to try to put it into real systems in draft, in development. FMM2, which is where we want to get to for the majority of artifacts in AU Core, is where we have actually tested the majority of artifacts in AU Core. And it's not just majority of artifacts, it is, and I've underlined those. We're looking for at least 3 independently developed systems, at least 80% of the core data elements, which is really 80% of the core requirements. We want to have tested those for AU Core to say that we have a degree of confidence that AU Core could be a working standard for Australia. So that's what we're going for. And that'll form the background for our test report back section. But let's do a bit of forward planning. Just waiting for this catch up. I think there's like a 5-second delay. Aha, here we are. Okay, so we're in August. August is ballot and testing focus, basically. And I mean, there are a lot of the meetings will happen during that period, but that's really the main. In September, we're still doing testing in AU Core, and we're also now in reconciliation. We're going to go through and reconcile the ballot. October is reconciliation. This is all R1 stuff. November, by November, I would hope we're finished. As in, we're basically finished R1. We're now in a transition month. And that transition month means we're going and evaluating what can be FMM level 2. and making some decisions on that. But we're also now in scoping and planning for the next set of work. That includes AU Core, Fire IG, and it includes other projects associated with it. I don't have a slide because I ran out of time early this morning, but the 3 items for future work for Sparked that have been brought in are work on reason for encounter, work on chronic disease management, and work on patient summaries. Those are the 3 that have been forecast. They were announced by DOHAC in a webinar about 2 to 3 months ago in a Sparked webinar, and they're continuing through into the planning. And in fact, in the September workshops for Sparked, so there's a Sparked face-to-face that you should probably have been invited to. I don't remember the days, but there's been an email about that. That's what those workshops will largely be focused on, or at least one of those days is about starting to do the scoping and the early work on those 3 forward topics. And we need to consider in AU Core how those relate to what we do, including both the AU Core IG, what comes in, reason for encounter in terms of, is that terminology, is that profiles, how are we looking to support that? But also for some of the projects, maybe that's actually a separate IG. So some of that early planning and scoping is going to start to happen in the November transition month. They'll have already had the overall kind of Sparked focus in September with the CDG, kind of 2-day session, and then continuing to sort of bring that in as we look to, well, what is the next year or so set of work under AU Core going to be? And so December is where I'm forecasting that we'll actually be holding proper scoping workshops. We'll be making decisions, having had some of the clinical design group work and the early kind of ideas about what's happening in November. And in December, we're coming together and going, well, what are we actually agreeing to work on? What is the R2 for AU Core? And what, if any, are the other projects that we think need to happen, basically, in order to support that work that we're going to commit to? So that's what December's going to be. There'll be connectathons in December as well. Which means, I guess, in terms of colour, salmon? The ballot reconciliation, salmon is R1. And really from November, we're into R2 at this point and future work. And that's what we keep going and doing. The published deadline for R1 is January. If you were at our last AU Core meeting, you'll know why, because there's a administrative overhead of time in terms of the ballot period, where after we finish ballot, we send out to voters and let them withdraw, and that's open for a while. So there's a relatively long administrative period where we've finished making a decision before a standard is actually officially published. So it'll be by January, maybe it'll be earlier, but that all depends on the HL7 AU processes in the background. And the Inferno kit will be published the next month, basically, from when that is. So that's kind of looking at our overall forward planning. So at this point, I've mostly been talking at you. And technical design groups are not really actually that much talking at you usually, but for this one it has been. And I kind of want to stop here and say, is this surprising to anyone, these timeframes? Is this concerning to anyone? Do we want to bring anything up now? I'm kind of raising this for a few reasons. One, I mean, we're far enough ahead. If there are things we need to think about, talk about, adjust, we can. But this is if we keep going the way we've been going, this is where we end up seating. Yes, Heath.
Talked about development in R2, publishing of R1 in June.
No, January.
Okay, January.
January 2020. Oh, yeah,
So-
January
So
2025.
publication of R2. What?
Oh, sorry, publication of R2, my bad. This slide might be better. So this is the early, take 5 seconds. If we go through yearly snapshots, then it's R2 gets published in January 2026. So it's yearly from then on. If that's what we commit to going forwards, it's annual.
Thank you.
So that's what the major milestones then for R2 start to look like.
So the CDI R2 by July.
Yes, CDI, that's a good point. I've talked to them. They have recommitted to the fact that they will be doing that. That is absolutely their plan. Although we don't have a draft of the AU CDI R2 yet. They are working on it now. And they're looking for the September workshops around reason for encounter, patient summary and chronic disease management to be driving what is in AU CDI R2. And in fact, I think they definitely expect to have in February a draft for comment for us again of AU CDI R2.
Okay, but there's a ballot for comment for art.
There is, and I don't like it. So that was probably this is my next slide, is looking at how we're working. I'm not so enamored of yearly updates, to be honest. I think that taking things through from use case development, through discussion, documentation, going through testing and connecting and putting things through, I think 12 months, I mean, I've not checked this with the powers that be, of course, I think that might be too soon. A ballot overhead is 5 to 6 months, always. And that means we have, from an R2 perspective, we have 3-4 months to talk about what we want to change, basically. And then we're in overhead of finishing it off. And that doesn't give us a lot of room to work on some major pieces.
Why do we need another ballot for comment?
I actually think if we make major pieces and changes, I think it's really important. If we are not making significant volume of substantive changes, it's not that important. So I think it really depends on what our R2 scope is as to whether it is important if we have a ballot for comment or not. Like I think everyone who went through the ballot for comment for AU Core R1, that was crucial. That was really valuable. And if we're going to be introducing significant new pieces, that's what we want. Especially like we've talked about, AU Core is just data access at the moment. It's request and response. It doesn't have the write and update. I would think we would have to go ballot for comment if we're going to introduce, or when we choose to introduce things like write and update. I don't know if that's R2. I actually suspect not, looking at our potential scope.
But aren't we now in a iterative improvement process where really we're moving through those FMM levels? And
We are for everything.
I guess
that's
what I'm
already
trying
gone
to say,
through them.
if the overhead is the balloting process, then so effectively you're going through 2 ballots a year, not 1 ballot a year.
Yeah.
Because of the public comment. I get what you mean about substantive changes. If we end up with just a ballot in January, which is
It'd
just
be
putting something
March.
in at FMM 1 level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just that's my question, whether we actually need a public comment and it's more of an iterative going through those FMM levels. And yes, it may not get to FMN 2 within a year, but At least you're not wasting 6 months of your life.
I'm glad you raised it. I think that depending on what we want to undertake in R2, that some of these will really necessitate, I guess, some different activities. I'm expecting, so for AU Core R2, what we don't, I don't have a slide for this, but our inputs as AU Core, we're a foundational standard. So there are some things that are inputs into us always. So AU CDI is always an input, and we look at that as to what we can support and when we can support it. We have some known backlog items. Most notably, there are two, which is medication use statement, which we made a decision back in, I think, May, actually, to say, look, this is not going to be in R1. We're going to say, let's get to it in R2. The other one was last updated. There's a set of elements in AU CDI called last updated, and we said this is not R1 business, this is backlog. We may or may not choose to pick that up in R2. Personally, I think that's R3 business, depending on what the scope of R2 is. So we've got backlight items where AU Core as a technical design group has already looked at a number of things and gone, these are really valuable, but we're not going to put them in R1, they're for later on. And so in R2, that's one of our drivers. What are the things we've already gone, this is important, but we're not doing it now? There's also AU CDI. It'll move into R2. We need to look at that, what can and should be addressed now, and make decisions about those again. What do we bring in now? What do we put in our backlog? Then we always have downstream IGs. So that's e-requesting. What does e-requesting need from AU Core in order to support its business and its continued work? And we need to look at supporting that in AU Core R2. And then there's the new work. So we've already talked about, from the Spark perspective of government saying we care about reason for encounter, chronic disease management and patient summary. But then there's also the other aspect of the new work that's driven purely from the implementer community, where people have said, this is really important and we need to actually have this in place so that we can have meaningful high traffic integration. And that's a driver as well. All of those things will kind of come together in our December R2 scoping, which will be, as a Simpsons person, Simpsons growing up, and there's a thing with Mr. Burns, and he goes to Brazil, I think, and he has a disease, and there's lots of diseases trying to fit through a tiny door, and I kind of feel like that for R2. There's so many things, but there's only a certain amount we're going to be able to do for R2, whether it's 12 or 15 months, and we're going to need to make that decision as a group. It is a democracy. Everybody has a vote on what we work on, noting that what we actually select is what we will work on, and the people in the technical design group are committing to work on that, to test it, to bring it through. And I feel I've just gotten on the soapbox, so sorry about that, but yeah.
Good Simpsons reference.
Yeah. Daniel.
Yeah. Danielle, I just like to give a very general comment here. My perspective, having worked internationally, is that once you have the basics down for your AU Core, then the value add comes much more strongly in the upstream. In particular, things like disease-specific chronic disease stuff, in my opinion, should be in a downstream IG. It's specific to a community that's interacting around that. It needs a standard, but it needs a standard that's specific to that area that's refined. You don't want to bloat out AU Core with a whole lot of stuff that somebody uses somewhere, but is my opinion. and it is very strongly an opinion rather than a mandate, is that we should keep lightweight what we're doing in AU Core, because at the end it's going to be supported by devices, by all kinds of things, not just big, large bloated EMRs. So yeah, so my suggestion would be as soon as we've got AU Core R1, people will start using it and start creating downstream IGs, and that's where the evaluator is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's part of our work to look at, do we need to change anything? Is that questionnaire support in AU Core, like at a really abstract, just a generic level, say questionnaires, basic core questionnaires, or do we need to do nothing? And I guess that's what we need to look at and go, for this particular focus, chronic disease management, maybe we do already do everything we need to. And
Sorry, Danielle, can you just restate the other two priorities?
reason for encounter and patient summaries.
Okay. So chronic disease management feels like a different beast than those two, I've got to say. So
I agree.
definitely agree with going down the IG path for specific use cases.
I think chronic disease management is a large, it's large beast, but I think there's an aspect which is things you would want AU Core to support chronic disease management, which I think is different than actually.
It's going to be a very abstract discussion though, without some actual.
Yeah, but there's things like specific diseases, but then there's generic concepts such as care plans and care teams, which may have value in AU Core.
But I think all of this needs to be grounded in a actual implementation commitment, because without commitment to use and having a real concrete implementation example, this is all a very interesting academic exercise, but at the end of the day, if it's not implemented, it's not implemented. So allowing for a future potential is all very interesting, but someone's got to pay to actually have this thing built and in use. So unless we can recognise that up front, and it'll become very difficult to make concrete decisions about what we do need to do in AU Core.
And care teams, like just to take that example too, Heath, that's a fairly generic thing in itself that's not related to chronic management too. So I don't know that you want to tie those together. So if you think about things like diabetes, like are there specific things we need to manage there? Like is that what you're thinking, Heath? Or?
Well, yes, but I think that the core use case that is topical at the moment is chronic disease, and in particular care plan, management plans and things like that.
Spend a lot of time.
Because it's obviously if you're in a care plan and need to track, and you want to track certain. I want to track your blood pressure every 6 months or whatever, right? So that's one of the things. Where does the blood pressure come from? Okay, we can do that already, right? But it's but it's also like, yeah, if you want to actually use plans and have plans being shared and all that, that's hard.
Yeah, so if we're getting to shared care plans, you're planning.
Yeah, but again, a core of the core of a care plan, at least getting a core part of a care plan, like there's some value in that.
Who's involved in a care team, but it's also like in some ways too, it links into e-requesting because it's it's essentially team care arrangement. Referrals, right? So it's so
being able to say this is a referral into the cardiology unit B at Monash.
Yeah, or a typical team care arrangement. You've got a dietitian and a diabetes educator in a team care arrangement for GPs, right? That's normal business, right? It's actually a part of a planning referral pattern. So it's what would we be actually putting forward then? We just agree on what those basic data elements are.
That's what, okay, so part of that is starting from September, I guess. So coming back to the time frame, noting that nobody can see that yet because I've just moved to it and it'll take 5 seconds, is in September, the initial focus and working groups are going to happen around those topics. And part of what we need to look at in terms of forming our backlog, what do we think needs to come through is doing that work. Basically, what makes sense, what doesn't, what makes sense now, what makes sense later. And that's up to the technical design group.
I mean, I'll reiterate, I'm concerned about that next year around that public comment scenario. It's 3 months to get ready for that. We're really not going to get much done.
I agree.
So I think as part of planning, we need to perhaps revisit the need or value of a ballot for comment.
Yes.
And I get what you're saying, sanity things, but maybe it's a partial part of the ballot or something that that's all we're commenting on.
Yeah.
Just to keep the administrative overhead, that's what I'm worried about, is that you're in the 6 months worth of administration rather than actually doing valuable stuff. So I think
And
that
I'm
we
about it too.
Yeah, we can have snapshots anytime for connectathons and other things. So that's not a problem. So if it was decided that we would just run connectathons instead, or but I like your idea of having maybe more directed balloting.
even if it's more informal comment rather than a formal comment. I think that initial ballot for comment was necessary because this was all new. It was like kind of a test run for us.
So
Now I think it's just iterative.
let's flag it as, oh, sorry, Chandon.
So in the last year's connectathon and before that, there were actually 2 more tracks, and one's the smart launch and I think other ones IPS. Have they been kind of removed, like especially smart launch configs? And
That's up to them. So in terms of HL7 AU tracks, that's,
Independent.
part of code, like say for identity management, and
well,
how do you do authorization identity?
at a very abstract level, yes. But in terms of the smart work, the actual work, no. That's a separate track that's going through work with apps. And I think Sean's bringing some of that to the Connectathon tomorrow. But
There was like a specific, there was a HL7 AU applications page that was Brian was maintaining.
I think Keith can respond to that.
So, I mean, for starters, it's independent of this sparked TDG process. So all we've done is say you should use whatever it is, app launch as authorization. This is the Connectathons are a HL7 Australia activity, independent of the sparked activities that we're here today. Now, we ran a number of those tracks as part of another CSRO project, which was about smart app launch, or in particular more around health checks, things like that. So the interest became less after a while, so we stopped it and in favour of putting some emphasis into AU Core instead. If there's enough interest and there's enough track leads, then we can start up another track. But it really comes down to volunteers to actually make that track happen and needing to have appropriate people to come. And it would be great, fantastic, if we can get another one up. But it does deplete our volunteer efforts.
I think the general question is like a part of the core discussion, the security. I don't see any security.
It's there.
Well,
But we
discussions with especially the cybersecurity.
we can have a chat offline as well, because part of that is, do you think something needs to be supported in core that isn't yet, I guess? And
With you just referencing the smart app launch and the
Exactly. So as part of the health check stuff, we basically looked at, do we need an Australian profile for smart app launch? The outcome of it was no. We just simply go to the universal one that is already published. It's a matter of us just looking at what is special in Australia. And we actually have put forward some adjustments around it, and it's around questionnaires, passing questionnaire context, as part of apps, some changes as part of that. That was an outcome of our connectathons here in Australia in the context of health checks. So really, there is no need for a profile at this stage for Smart App launch in Australia.
But I think if we had some track leads to run a stream like that, that would be useful, I think, for the community, because it's a good chance to do it for real, together. But it's especially like with people with apps coming and things like that want to try it out. So it's
and flip that around, it's like, and using AU Core. Right? So that's what Sean is doing, is that he's actually coming in the context of AU Core. The way he authorises, it just happens to be Smart App launch.
So I'm going to close the conversation down at the moment on the Smart App launch. I'll note there's a December connectathon, I think. Yeah, no, it's December, and potentially if there's enough interest, there would be a Smart launch track in it. Won't be sparked. That would come from other interest from the community, which, yay. I mean, that makes more stuff for core anyway, more testing results. It all comes through core, which is the point. So I'm going to wrap up planning-ish. I'm really happy to have gotten the comments from people today around some of the forward planning, because they are things we're going to have to actually get into discussions about and start digging through the detail on what is out there and what are people interested in working on, because it is the group and not just, me or Spark who's doing the work here. It comes from you guys. So I'll just finish off with ballot reconciliation. So tomorrow starts Connectathon, and then 5th of September, our next meeting, we're right into ballot reconciliation, frankly, from AU Core. That stuff will come out via email with notification on what those things are we're going to be voting on. From the 5th of September onwards, that's what we're going to be doing, basically, is looking at from the committee on where they have flagged things that they think that we should be considering before we publish R1. Basically, that's what that is. There's potential, depending on what we want to do, noting that we have formed an amazing community, some of whom are new to fire, that we might introduce some topic-specific information sessions in between those. So the ballot reconciliation sessions will always be the fortnight sessions that we already have that are set up for AU Core, but we might, depending on the topic or the interest from members, to set up interspersed between that some information sessions on what is actually the topic, what is being raised, some Fire 101 business to help people be able to actually really come to grips, I think, with some of that. We'll see how we go. It depends on really what is raised. So just letting people know that now. I think we can move on past this, noting our timeframes for this meeting to get into AU Core testing. So I'm going to talk about product submissions. Yay, we've got 33 different products who've gone, yes, we will test AU Core. Awesome stuff. There's a number of, we've got the logos there from organisations who to test AU Core. If you have or are interested to test AU Core, as in you do anything with patients, practitioners, organisations, locations, medications, allergies, problems, procedures, immunisations, then great. Send through your logo to fire@csiro.au and sign up to test it, and we'll add you. But here's where we are. So out of 33, 16 have tested AU Core and submitted results so far. Across the AU Core set, there have been 12 different products or different systems testing the AU Core responder. there's been 7 testing requester, as in client app, basically. And 2 have been profile only, as in they do not intend to stand up a RESTful FHIR interface, but they have FHIR data. That's profile only. So from that, here are our 16 different products. This is, I guess, oh, this is an exclusive view. I know it'll take a few seconds to come to you guys. This will soon be on the Confluence page. It's not there yet. So we've got from these, we've got from the Australian Digital Health Agency, Beta Software, Best Practice, CSIRO's got a few, like the Smartforms app, I guess, that was being talked about the 715 healthcare assessment from Sean Fong. I'll probably clarify for people, since I'm CSIRO, that from Sparked, yes, the Spark or Dev FHIR server comes under us, but the other things from CSIRO, which is a very, very large scientific organisation, some of these people I will probably never meet or speak to in my entire life. I have spoken to these people, but they're in different organisational groups. So it's not about the Sparked program, it's about servicing different particular projects. Inner Systems, Create IT has got a couple in there. We've got Linear AI, MediRecords, Team Unicorn, Tech Intro, Telstra Health, and White Fox. That's the results we have. More people have tested, as in tested during the events, but have not actually sent through test results yet. If you're missing from this list, then email me or submit your results if you've not submitted them yet, so we can make sure that you're here and we're actually adding you to it. So this is what I've got in terms of my access. We're a little bit behind. There are 2 systems we're missing that aren't yet in these results. So let's talk about testing. I know we've only got 20 minutes left, but this is coming into, we've done a lot of great work. We've talked about the things we want. Yes, but who's implementing? What does it look like? Where are things happening? From AU Core's perspective, those of you who've been here for the last 6 months or more will know that in AU Core we've got kind of 2 perspectives here. We've got profile only, which is that use case where you're not standing up a FHIR RESTful API. You have FHIR data though, that's what you care about. You want to have FHIR data in the right shape. And that's one way to implement AU Core. And the other is to have profile support plus interaction support. AU Core R1 is data access, and that comes in 2 flavors, be that the client app who's requesting data, or be that the responder, the server, who is supplying data back. And so in terms of testing, we have looked at these aspects. This is what we're tracking. We're going to be reporting back to you guys and then back up through our governance chain in terms of the FHIR work group in order to have these results recognised. We're also going to be tracking it tomorrow in terms of the Connectathon. So, profile only. That is a slide that cuts off a lot of stuff. Let me fix it. We can do this real quick. I was just absolutely too anxious about 4 a.m. this morning. Okay, profile only. These are the rules in AU Core. So this is what you need to do. Noting that profile only is on a profile basis. So if you're just doing data, you have no obligations to be like the whole set of AU Core. You just go this bit. This is the thing I care about. This is what I'm doing. It's about the data itself. So those 3 bullet points say what we care about is mandatory elements, must support elements, You're going to do those according to the profile and implement the requirements on missing data. That's what those requirements are. That's what we care about. So when we look at testing from data perspective, what we're tracking is which systems are exchanging data or have data according to profiles. And also the extensions that we have supported in those profiles. Terminology we have supported there, whether that's PBS, AMT, SNOMED, LOINC. And we're also looking from a course perspectives on the rules on missing data and suppressed data. Looking at our timeframes for the rest of this meeting, I'm just going to try and cover off the profile only support and where we need further work or where I'd like further testing work. And we'll get into the interaction stuff later. At any point in time, if you've got a question and you want to go into any of this, pop your hand up, be that online, in the room. So, FMM2, this is the basics for a working standard, really. We've had a good idea, we've agreed on it as a technical design group, like 60 people have gone, yes, this is fabulous. That's all very nice, but now we want to go, does it work? Basically, that's what we want to check before we go, this is a meaningful working standard. So what we're looking to do is to test at least 3 independently developed systems across at least 80% of our requirements. That's our goal, AU core working standard. I'm just going to have that background because when we go for profile coverage, so this is a shortcut, stick the word AU core in front of all of this, like AU core location, AU core organization, when it comes up on the screen. I'm just waiting for the lag. There we are. Okay. So these are our profiles. These are the number of different systems that we have formal test results for. More systems have tested this, but we don't actually have formal test results submitted to the Sparked team on this yet. Slash, where we've got question marks. So as we come down on the left, we've got location, organisation, patient, practitioner role. There's a question mark for sex assigned at birth, which is to say that the team at Sparked has not gone through the results yet and analysed that. I think we have results there. We've not looked at it in detail, so don't know. Maybe we've got 0, maybe we've got 4 systems, not sure. And so as we go through, noting what we want is 3 independently developed systems across 80% of coverage. Overall, this is not looking too bad. But what we need to do is go into more detail to work out where that is. This is just if one system tested one element, they're recorded at this point. We've got a detailed spreadsheet. It's not up on Confluence yet, but it will be. Hopefully by the end of this week, by Friday, we'll start making this stuff up there. We've just, there's been a lot filling out Excel spreadsheets, basically, so that people can see them. Not because it's, you know, secret squirrel business. It's just, yeah, test coverage, man. Filling it out manually, it's, you know, effort. So, yes?
So the missing data and suppressed data,
That's just because we've not tracked it explicitly, I think.
do we need to?
Yes, we do. It is part of the profile data, and we need to confirm that we have 3 or more systems testing missing data and suppressed data. I think. We can argue about it.
Just going back to the 80%.
Yeah, I know.
It might be part of the 80%.
It might be. I don't see any reason not to, though. To my knowledge,
Get it. Great, but
I think we can.
the maturity of the systems may not be quite there. I know.
I think we can get it though. I really do. What? No, I do think we can get some partial coverage, or at least actually track whether this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Yeah, and the other complexity on that one is it's a separate aspect really, that it's missing data, suppressed data on all of those other resources. So
yeah, oh, I know.
Is one resource of missing data and enough to tick, or is it everyone? So it's tricky.
It is. So these are some of the numbers. Again, this will be available on the website really soon. Actually, as soon as I just log off from this, I'll convert this to PDF so you guys can see this. What that means, I think, in terms of coverage, going back to what our goal is this is what it looks like in terms of where I think we have adequate testing and where we would like more testing. And I was quite interested to see that medication request and medication are part of that. Because otherwise, the majority of the entities, the standard things that cross use cases and the clinical were really significantly covered. What I'm going to do is just show you the bits where we don't actually have more than 3 systems testing them, basically. So that's the next couple of slides. I'm going to have to move through this really quickly because I don't want to hold people up from morning tea. Okay, so let's start. So sex assigned at birth. We have an extension for it. We've not tracked it. I actually think we do have some systems testing it, but we've not tracked it yet. And we've got a couple of people from the test team who are out sick with flu because it's flu season. So, you know, I'm letting them rest at home rather than calling them going, are you sure? So we'll come back to you on this one.
I'm aware of a couple, but
Yes.
they're all CSRO ones.
Well, there's still a couple.
So, I mean, an aid box maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let us know if you've got something that you can do. Heights are going to be the problem.
That's what I thought. I really thought we had. We don't have it. Is that a hand? Oh, no, that's just a yawn. Okay. Okay. Medication request.
Fractions.
So both from medication request and medication, it's PBS codes, basically. So all the other must support elements and AMT, we have evidence of multiple, like 8, 9 systems testing. What we don't have is PBS codes. We've only got them from one. I'm looking for the next couple of connectathons. I'll go around to people like in the next one tomorrow and see if anyone is looking at medications and PBS codes and see what we've got out there. So that's interesting. That's all the hold up is on that one. And then, yeah, missing data, suppressed data. We've not tracked it. I actually suspect a couple of systems have done it, but I think we need to dig into the data on our side, on the Sparks team, to track that better. Next bit. Observations now. The rest is observations. If you hadn't noticed on the ticks, then that's the clinical and entity stuff. Everything else now is in the observation space. This might flick. Okay, so blood pressure, we just don't have evidence of anyone testing observation data absent reason. Everyone's testing actual blood pressures. Surprise. Well, look at that. Similar to body height. Everyone's testing actual body heights. We don't necessarily have evidence of these other things. This is unfortunately relevant for us because we inherit from the fire standard. The fire standard is the one who says these are must support elements, not AU core necessarily. And so no one at the moment is indicating that their use case or their system has any use for that. Heath, you have a hand up. Go
These
on.
just don't make sense.
I know, but what can we do? Actually, they do. Body height might be lying down. That's a conflicting factor in which you might record as component.
I would argue otherwise, but
Same with body weight.
I
It might
think
be,
we
are
need
you
to
wearing
focus on
shoes
it.
or not?
Yeah.
Body weight, are you wearing shoes or not? That kind of thing is the additional information you might supply to quantify the value.
the fact that they must support is ridiculous, for lack of a better way of saying it. Anyway, I don't think these should be holding us up back. It's basically my opinion. But
I'll be arguing that. So this is additional coverage desire. I'll note here our goal is 80% coverage. Everywhere we do not have 100% coverage, I've noted. That doesn't mean that these things aren't sufficient. So blood pressure, we've got one element, basically, which is a native fire element. I think we can easily say that's fine. That's sufficient.
and I'm confused on what that is, how it's used.
An absent reason. Okay.
Even though missing data uses a different.
All right, let's go through these things quickly because this is where we don't. And maybe we want things, but it's really likely that most systems, they're not testing these things basically because they care about exchanging temperatures and weights and heights. So that's what we get the test data for, and we have significant amounts of that. We just don't for the things we're inheriting from the fire standard. And I think given that the fire standard itself has these and has tested these, that we can probably argue quite easily that this is acceptable and is covered underneath the fire standard. Next, same thing. Heart rate, body height, body temperature, it's largely the same elements again, which you just don't see commonly when you're exchanging heights, temperatures, blood pressures, body weights, same thing, basically. But again, I'm not surprised we don't have data from systems testing this. Then we come to diagnostic result and pathology. So that'll come up on screen in a second. This is due to biomarkers in AU Core, where we're exchanging essentially things like EGFRs, HbA1c, that kind of thing. And we've got diagnostic result, which is generic, and pathology result, which is more specific. That's your lab stuff. In pathology result, there's quite a significant amount of coverage. It's just, again, and I think maybe there's a question there on should those be elements in R1 as must support? Unlike the previous observations that we inherit must support from the fire standard, don't. And I don't know if we wish to flag must support on data absent reason for diagnostics in R1.
I think in AU core use, because generally it's coming from an EMR, it's probably validated and will only ever be present or not present, right? Whereas I think if it's on a pathology exchange, you're more likely to get a data absent reason. So if it's like in a report. So it's, yeah, I don't know, maybe not for AU core.
When I've been looking at these as part of my review, method for me, barely think I've ever seen that, B2 message in particular. Interpretation, yep, good. Body site, struggle with the use case. So as a 80% kind of use case and similar with identifier, maybe. So I think there's some review, and my memory of, I don't remember a lot of TDG time on this particular, maybe I just missed it, but
No, I don't think anyone really cared that much.
So I think there's obviously part of ballot responses, and I'll encourage others to vote through ballot on some of these items. But this is probably going to be where I'm going to focus my attention around ballot response. I think there's a lot of superfluous items in there.
So let's put a call out for people here who, if your system has diagnostic results and you don't have these elements and you don't think they're particularly relevant, it's worth raising them. Because the only way we take them out of AU Core is through a formal, let's raise it, let's talk about it, let's vote on it. It's in there now. It's going to be in R1 unless we make the decision to take it out. Part of why we're doing this report back is we've now had, it was 16, 18 people testing. These are the things they're not testing. Do we need them in R1? Should we take them out at this point? Some of them I think is reasonable. Some, like we've just talked about, like observation method, maybe not. And we should leave them out until we actually want them.
It'd be good to get requesters to say, do they want them?
Yes.
Yeah, as well, because that's another perspective, right? Because obviously if it's populative known and nobody's got them, we're going to get them. But it's if you do want them, that'd be interesting to know as well, I think.
I think the use case that I can see with them is in point of care. That's probably where it becomes more to actually know that it came from an Apple Watch or
I
something.
think we have someone online. Yep.
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while, but I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
sorry.
If I was checking that. It's okay. I was just going to say, I agree, Danielle, that we need to look at doing them as if they're in the system or not. They are valid and they are used internationally for certain use cases, like he's alluded to. They're also straight from the fire spec. So if we're talking about the 80%, I'm pretty sure most of these are already mature in terms of testing overseas. So again, I think you can leverage these similar to the observations that you pointed out earlier.
Now, so noting time, and which is it's time, and we just come to
I'll
that
also point
last
out-
bit. Oh yes, go.
Sorry, Phil's also had his hand up for a while.
That helps.
I can't see it. Yeah, sorry, I just can't see it on the Teams.
That's okay.
I
Go
just
for
wrote
it.
down because some of the things that it sounded like you were trying to wrap up, so apologies, but I'll make it really quick. I think most of these items are things that are useful, but they have like they're not commonly done today in the V2 world. I think this is where my head kind of goes. So for like a diagnostic report, you know, almost every RIS that I am aware of just sends us a report, and that's what we're getting. And so we're not getting body sites and interpretations and some of those kinds of pieces. And then we get to pathology. I forget there was, reason, you know, the reason that the data was missing or the method that the pathology type used to report on that. That's not common in that V2 world. So I'm not saying it's not appropriate. I'm just saying, like, I can tell you that my system today wouldn't be expecting these items. Not that we haven't met them somewhere through the US side of things, but it's not common practice in most of our EMR implementations. And so that's where I sit there in my head going, do we spend a lot of time here, or do we wait until we have that use case where we really want to use it and explore it further? And open to either.
That's part of our principles of having it in AU Core or not, is around commonality. How often is it used? Are existing systems using it? So
I think data absence used. It's just you probably don't see it because we tend to put like star in the results, and then in the comment we'll say star. We didn't do this because the tube broke or something. Method I don't see at all. It's usually wrapped up in the lowing code. It's supposedly telling you the method, but in that report. So I'd say data absence is relevant, but method maybe not.
Yep.
and that would be my argument around height as well. Body weight or whatever. Is that blood pressures? So.
All right. So I'm going to wrap this up here. And okay, yes, good, excellent. I'm just wrapping that all up on that content. So we're about to do
Do our sign up sheet
in person, yes.
in person.
So for those of you online, this is the end of the AU course sign up. What we will do for e-requesting is there's a separate one. So you should have that email already. We'll stop the recording when Nicholas does, which I think you may have stopped. And we'll see you in the e-requesting meeting if you're going to join. And that's